and welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Years ago, I began recording the bedtime stories I told my children every night. Now, I'd like to share those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children. Once upon a time, there was a house. And in the backyard of the house, there was a big stone patio. And underneath the stone patio, there was a colony of ants. And one of the ants was named Peggy. Peggy. Peggy the Ant, yes. She was a worker ant. It was her job to go out and find food that had been left out so that the other ants could come and they could carry it back to the colony so that the ants that didn't get food, the soldier ants that protected the colony and the queen ant that laid new eggs.
Was he eating it?
Well, she hasn't found any food yet. This is just the beginning of her day. One morning she got up bright and early just as the sun was getting up and she went out to look for food. She wiggled her feelers, which helped her sniff the air and try to find out where there was food. And she really didn't smell much of anything. So she began to walk along in a direction toward a swing set that she knew was in the backyard and where sometimes she'd found food that had been dropped in the past. Well, she'd gone on for a little while when suddenly there was a rumbling in the ground and a great pink head poked up from under the ground. It was her friend Edward the earthworm. She said, "Hi, Edward." He said, "Hello today, Peggy. How are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm good. I'm looking for food." "Oh, you should just eat dirt like me, then you'd never run out of food. Ha 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 ha." She said, "Well, that just doesn't sound very good, Edward. Thanks, though." "Bye, Peggy. Have a good day." "Bye-bye, Edward." She walked along for a while.
Worms will eat dirt.
Yeah, sort of. They eat some of the stuff that's in dirt.
I don't like dirt.
No, people don't eat dirt.
Yuck.
So,
Could dirt make you sick?
yes, it could. So, Peggy was walking along, and she came across a snail. And she didn't know the snail's name, but he was going very slowly.
Leaving a track of slime.
Yes, he was. He was leaving a track of slime because that's what he glided along on. Well, Peggy waited until the snail went by, and then she went through the track of slime. When she got to the other side, she sort of wiped her feet off on a blade of grass, and then went on towards the swing set. At one point, she had to stop because she heard this sound. And she was afraid it was a wasp. Some wasps like to eat ants, so she hid underneath a little pebble. It was cool under the pebble. She sort of curled up next to the ground so that nobody could see her, and she listened for the wasp to go away. The sound faded. Peggy came back out and began to crawl through the grass. It took her many hours. It took her 2 or 3 hours to get to the swing set. She got out there and she started to crawl across the rocks around the swing set, and she found something. It was clear, and it was made out of sort of a plasticky kind of substance. And when she crawled in the open end of it, there were little tiny drops of something blue that had once been inside it. She tasted the blue stuff, and it was sweet and tasty, and she thought, this would be an excellent food for the newborn ants. So she took several of the drops with her in her mouth, and then she started the long hike back to the colony, where she would tell the other worker ants. As she walked back, she periodically stopped and put sort of the point of her bottom on the ground, and she had special smell chemicals in her bottom that when she touched it to the ground left a path that other ants could follow to know how to get back to the wrapper with the yummy blue stuff in it. She walked along, she crossed the snail trail, and she crossed where she'd seen Edward, and she was almost back to the colony when she heard it. She heard and she looked around and there was no pebble to hide under, and she was sort of out on the stones of the patio, so that wasn't a good place to hide, so she started running towards the colony as fast as she could. She was really running fast, and the wasp went right by over her head, and she thought she was in trouble. But then she saw up ahead there was a crack in the stone, and so she sprinted as fast as she could for it, and she dove into the crack, and she was there in the dark, and the wasp went right over. And then she heard a voice in the dark say, "Who goes there?" And she said, "It's me, Peggy." And the voice said, "Oh, Peggy, this is the back entrance to the colony. I wasn't expecting you." She said, "Who is that?" "It's Jubby." "Jubby? Are you on guard duty today, Jubby?" Jubby was a soldier ant that was one of her friends. He said, "Yep. You want in?" "Oh, yes, please. I don't want to go back out there. There's a wasp out there today." "Yeah, they've been causing trouble lately." "Okay, let me roll this stone away." And he rolled a rock away that was covering the entrance to the colony, and she went in. She hadn't come in this back entrance very often, and so it took her a minute to figure out where she was going. Normally she came in the front entrance that had the places where food was stored. Back entrance was near where the queen was, but that was okay because that's where the young ants hatched. So she walked on, she walked by the queen, and the queen waved to her. Now the queen ant in a colony is the mommy of every single other ant in the colony. So...
Is she mad?
No, she wasn't mad. She waved to her and said, "Hello, how are you today?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just fine, Mom, thanks." And then she walked on until she found a place where young ants were just hatching out of their eggs. And she found a couple young ants that were just out of their eggs, and they were looking around with this terrible, hungry look in their eyes. And she walked up to them, and she gave them each a little bit of the blue, sticky, yummy stuff. And they each one said, "Oh, thank you! Oh, thank you! Oh, thank you!" Just like that. And she walked right down the line of little ants, giving each one of them just a little bit of the drop of blue stuff. And they started to look not so hungry and sort of look around and explore a little bit more. She could see that most of them were worker ants like her, and she was looking forward to them being ready to come out and help harvest things. Then she reported back to the other worker ants. She told them about the trail she'd left behind, where there was the plastic wrapper with the yummy blue liquid in it. And they immediately all started out, and as they were leaving, she said, "Oh, I forgot one other thing." And they turned and they said, "What?" She said, "Watch out for wasps." And they said, "Oh yes, we will. You deserve a rest now." And that's what she did. She went and she found a quiet, dark corner of the colony, and she took a well-deserved rest.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created, told, and edited today's story. Questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was composed by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it, or leave a review on your podcast provider. Our email is storiesforwonderfulchildren@gmail.com. You can also contact us on Facebook or Twitter. I'll see you next time.